The longest day. That's the appropriate theme for our reflections this week, as together we journey with Joshua through the exciting and challenging narrative of Joshua chapter 10. Joshua chapter 10, which details for us the longest day, the day on which the sun stood still and the day on which the moon stood still. The longest day. Yesterday we read the verses in Joshua 10 detailing the background to the longest day and what happened on the longest day. And today we want to think about the virtue of Joshua, the virtue of Joshua. More of that in a moment. By way of background, the king of Jerusalem heard what the Gibeonites had done. And so he announced that these traitors had to be punished. He figured that if a great city like Gibeon surrendered to the Israelites, then that was one more barrier removed from Israel's advancement in the land which God, remember, had promised to the Israelites, the promised land. The Israelites would only be a few miles, literally, geographically, from the city of Jerusalem. And therefore it was important for the Canaanites to recover that key city, even if they had to take it by force. And so what happened? Well, what happened was this, that 4 other Canaanite kings allied with Adoni-Zedek, and together they camped before Gibeon. Now bear in mind that the poor Gibeonites had made peace with the invaders and were now at war, ironically, with their former allies. Verse 6, the Gibeonites attempt to make good on their covenant with Israel. They can't stand on their own against this united army. And so they form a NATO-type alliance. Which brings us to the $64,000 question in all of this. What would Joshua do? And knowing firsthand the weakness of their own word, bear in mind the deception, the Gibeonites had to be a bit worried about whether or not Joshua will keep his word, whether Joshua will fulfill his obligations. Well, Joshua had different options open to him. To maybe commit, to maybe send a couple of soldiers to look as if he is keeping his promise, but actually really passively breaking the vow. Or not to get involved at all. In fact, there is logically a benefit to Joshua not getting involved. Just sit back, Joshua, and let the Canaanites destroy themselves. Let it sort it out amongst themselves. They deserve it, and it would make an otherwise embarrassing situation go away. But what does Joshua do? Joshua commits. Joshua does not give into the temptation of seeking his own glory or his own adulation. Rather, he considers how much breaking the promise he gave would detract from the glory of God. You see, commitment is not measured in the giving of our word. It is measured by the faithfulness to the word when it costs us something to do it. Commitment is not measured in the giving of our word per se. It is measured by our faithfulness to that word, which we've given when it costs us something to do it. And so what does Joshua do? Well, Joshua commits fully. We see the virtue of Joshua coming to the fore here. This mighty man of God, this son of Nun, this protege of Moses. This man of God commits fully. He doesn't send half a fighting force or a few men. He sends everything which he has. Joshua commits his entire army, including, as we read, all the mighty men of valor. He invests his best time, his best energy, and his best resources. Why does he do that? Because Joshua knows that a partial promise is equivalent to a broken promise. Joshua knows you can't be half faithful. You're either totally unfaithful or faithful. He commits fully. He also commits immediately without delay. Joshua went up from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him and the mighty men of valor. His obligation is a matter of obedience to God, and in that he doesn't delay. He doesn't say, God, I'm going to have to go away and think about this for 24 hours and give me time, I'm not sure. No, he knows what to do. He knows what to do. He steps out with God. Promises are meaningless if we put a time scale on them. And then we don't really follow through on that promise. Joshua commits fully. Joshua commits immediately. He commits sacrificially. It costs him something. You know, commitment is costly. Commitment is costly. Commitment is often inconvenient. Commitment is often sacrificial. At any inconvenience and risk to all the families of Israel, Joshua chooses to commit sacrificially. The army would march 25 miles from Gilgal to Gibeon under cover of darkness. Their journey would include an ascent of 4,000 feet up steep and difficult terrain without an opportunity to really rest or catch their breath. And by the time they arrived, his wiped out army could well be vulnerable because of their fatigue. You know, there was a cost to this. That there was a very human, brittle cost to this, what the army would have to do. But Joshua commits them sacrificially, and he also commits faithfully. He does what is right, though he doesn't feel like it. Joshua starts marching, note this, before God states to him that he will be successful. He didn't wait for God's guarantee before doing what was right, because he knew, based on what had happened in the time previously, that God had provided, that God would be faithful. So Joshua commits faithfully. Only when the feelings and the guarantees are not there will our faithfulness be tested. The virtues of Joshua in that he committed fully, immediately, sacrificially, and faithfully. May we have those Joshua-like virtues. May our commitment be a full commitment, be an immediate commitment, be a sacrificial commitment, and a faithful commitment. When we make those commitments, God, as he did for Joshua, will honor them.